Okay, we are continuing in chapter Yud Gimel and chapter 13 of Tanya, and now we're going to take a little bit of a change of direction here. And the Alter Rebbe, even though he doesn't spell it out so clearly, but if you look at it in the words, it's a very interesting thing which the Alter Rebbe is doing right now. What the Alter Rebbe wants to do here is he wants to show us that there are actually many different levels in the Beinoni. Just like we saw in chapter Yud, in chapter 10, when he spoke about a tzaddik, there are many different levels of tzaddikim, tzaddik v'tovlo, tzaddik v'ralo, and many levels in that whole gamut. As well as in chapter 11, when we started speaking about the Rasha, he spoke about many different levels in tzaddik, Rasha v'tovlo, and even Rasha v'ralo. Now, what the Alter Rebbe says over here is, we just mentioned before on the first page, the first side of Perek Yud Gimel of chapter 13, we mentioned how here is a person, right, that has the Yetzer Hara coming from one side, the Yetzer Tov coming from the other side, right, the two judges that we've been speaking about, and he needs Hashem to come in and add a little bit of light to the Nefesh Elokis, so the Nefesh Elokis could win out. Like it said over there, that Hashem is standing by the right side of the Evyon, right? And so Hashem is literally coming and helping him out to make him win. Here we're going to talk about something a little bit different. Here, all of a sudden, now we're talking about a Jew that is, so to speak, learning all day long. He's learning all day long. So this Jew, since he's learning all day long, you might think, or he might think, that look, he's not getting any feelings of doing anything wrong coming up into his mind. He doesn't have any impulses for doing the wrong thing. So maybe, in fact, we could say about him, he's actually a tzaddik. You know, we thought that he was a Beinoni, but maybe he's a tzaddik. So he starts to think himself, I must be a tzaddik. That's who I am. And that's what he starts to think. But the Alter Rebbe is coming to show us that, in fact, that is not true. That is not what we're talking about. That, in fact, he also is a Beinoni. That's really who he is. And that's what the Alter Rebbe comes here to tell us in this piece of Tanya. We're holding 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down on page 36 from the top of the page. Va'af. So he says like this: Va'af misha b'tayras Hashem cheptzo v'yega ba yomam v'layla lishma. So this person, this Beinoni, that he is completely involved in Tayras Hashem and doing exactly what Hashem wants, day and night. Day and night he's involved. And he does it lishma, meaning that he's doing it just for Hashem. That's him. So you think to yourself, wow, this guy's a real tzaddik. This is really amazing. So he says, Ein zu hoichecha klal shenidche haram imekoimo. Don't think for a second, however, with this person, that this means that he has pushed away the Nefesh Bahamias from its place, the Ra from its place. That's not what we're talking about here. That's not the case. Really what we're saying is what? That in fact, the Nefesh Bahamias is still as strong as it was from the beginning. It's in all of its strength, in its place. Meaning it didn't get pushed out of him. He's not subjugating his Nefesh Bahamias, that all of a sudden the Nefesh Bahamias is looking like the Nefesh Bahamias of a tzaddik. Right? Even a tzaddik v'ralo, whose Nefesh Bahamias is kafuf l'toiv, like we said in the first page of Tanya. That it's bent to the good. It's totally in its place, b'chal l'smoli, on the left side of his heart. Rak shelavushav shehei machshava dibur v'maiser. It's just that the garments of the soul, namely his thought, his speech, and his action, shel Nefesh Bahamias, of the animal soul, they're not enclothing themselves, not in the brain, that's obviously thought, not in the mouth, that's obviously speech, and not in the hands or any of the other limbs of the body, that's obviously his action. They're not there. Why? Mipnei Hashem shenasan, because of what? Because of Hashem shenasan shlita v'memshala l'mayach alalev. Because why? Now here we go back to what we said back in chapter 12. If you remember in chapter 12, we talked about the idea of mayach shalit alalev. that the brain is able to control the heart. Bitoldaso, the way it's born. Biyitziraso, the way it was formed. That's the way God made it. So when we were talking about in the beginning of chapter 13, we were saying, wait a minute. This person is not going to win automatically. He needs Hashem to come down and help him. Why? Shouldn't it be a situation where, in fact, that it's Mayach Shalat Alev? Like, what's the problem here? Why, So we said, no, it could be that by that Beinoni, that he's already holding in a time that the Nefesh Bahamias has regained its strength completely. And so therefore, he needs help. Over here, that's not what we're referring to. Over here, by this level of the Beinoni, this level of the Beinoni is holding by learning Torah all day long. So the Nefesh Bahamias never has a chance to regain its footing. It's not that the essence of the Nefesh Bahamias is not there. It's 100% there. It's just that it hasn't been able to get itself together. So by this person, now all of a sudden we have a different scenario. Now we have the scenario that we were talking about in chapter 12, that Mayach Shalat Alev, that the brain is in control of the heart. That's the scenario that we have here. And that's what it says. And why does this work this way? It works this way because Hashem himself gave the potential, gave the power for the brain to control the heart. That's the way Hashem set it up. And so by this Jewish person, by this Beinoni, he is holding in that level. And so therefore, it's a situation where his mayach, his brain, is in complete control. So that's why we say that the nefesh elokis, which is found in the brain, is able to completely control the entire body. Evrei aguf, kulam. Shilavush v'merkava l'shlosh levusheha. Namely, that the body itself should be just a garment, a merkava, a chariot, completely to the garments of the soul, of the nefesh elokis. That's what it is. That's the story here. She is labshu bahem shei machshava divrei ma'aseh shel tarig mitzvos haTorah. Namely, that they should be enclosed within them. Namely, the thought, the speech, and the action of what? Of the 613 mitzvahs and of the Torah. Fine. That looks great. And if you looked at it only from that perspective, you would say to yourself, oh, here we go. This guy is a tzaddik. That's what it seems like. His nefesh elokis is mamish in control, completely. But even in this person, it's not the case. Now remember, if we go back to the first chapter of Tanya, one of the main points that the Alter Rebbe is trying to emphasize throughout the book is, don't fool yourself. Don't fool yourself. Be realistic with who you are. And by being realistic with who you are able to be realistic with what are your goals. What are your goals in life? What is your mission down here in this world? Right? As we said, even in yesterday's class, when we were talking and we made reference to chapter 27, where over there the Alter Rebbe says, a person that has the same fight day in, day out, he thinks he's a failure. The Alter Rebbe says, what are you talking about? Maybe this is why you were created. If you just would be able to understand, what is the mission? What is my mission? Why am I here in this world? If we could understand this point, right, that's where it's at. And so therefore, the Alter Rebbe is saying, be realistic. Don't fool yourself. So even though, yes, it's true, your nefesh elokis is completely in control right now. But don't think that now your avoda is different. Don't think that now you're on the level of a tzaddik. You're not on the level of a tzaddik. That's not your avoda. That's not your place. That's not where you're supposed to be. And that's why it says over here, Aval mohuso va'atzmuso, the essence, shel nefesh elokis, of the nefesh, ein la shlita v'mshala, does not have complete control, al mohuso va'atzmuso shel nefesh bahamis b'beinoni, on the essence of the nefesh bahamis and the Beinoni. That's the point. Then he says even further, he says, however, Ki'im b'shas sha'avas Hashem hu b'hizgalus libo. Except for those times, like we talked about in chapter 12, when the love of Hashem is just bursting in his heart. At that time, be'esim mezumanim, those special times, kamo b'shas hatfila, like in the times of davening, right? U'biyotzeba, right? And those types of times, that's when we see that, yes, it's true, the nefesh bahami is totally sunken, that the nefesh elokis is completely in control. But really, it's those particular times. And then he goes further. Bi'af gam zois hapam, even in those times, eino rak shlita b'memshala levad. Right? It's not just a shlita, a control alone, kirichsiv, like it's written. Mal'um al'um yematz. This is referring to back in Parashas Toldos. We all remember the story with regards to Yaakov and Esav. So it says over there, k'shizeh kam ze noifel, k'shizeh kam, etc. Right? That's what Rashi explains. That when one side is going to be up in future generations, right, the other side is going to be down. And when the other side is going to be up, this side is going to be down. Now, it's true that refers to general history. It's true. But it also refers to me. It also refers to what's happening inside of the person, inside of the normal person. That when the nefesh elokis is up, the nefesh bahamis is down. When the nefesh bahamis is up, the nefesh elokis is down. So, over here, what we're saying is what? We're saying by this Beinoni, where he's on fire, yes, when he's really on fire, then the Nefesh Bahamis cannot be seen. Right? Like we talked about in those special times of davening in chapter 12, where you had Moichin the Gadlus, the mind was totally in an expansive state. Yes, that's true. That's in a very particular scenario, though. And that's what he says here. Kim b'shas she'avas Hashem hu b'izgalus libo. Right? When he specifically, the love of Hashem is bursting at the seams. In that type of time. Sha'nefesh alokis misam etzis miskareberes al nefesh bahamius. Because at that time, what happens? At that time, the nefesh alokis is winning over. He's being stronger. There's so much power over the nefesh bahamis. B'makor agvuros, in the source of the gvuros shehi bina liizbainim begedulas Hashem ein so baruch hu v'lahoylid ava aza laHashem kerish be'eis b'chal yimini shebelivo. So at that time, then, despite the fact that we're talking about an ava here, a love, which we generally speak about in terms of the idea of chesed, but here we're talking about a love like fire, that he's like on fire with his love. That fire has the source in terms of gvura, right? And we know that gvura comes from bina. What is it? What does that mean? We know that there are 10 spheros, or 10 powers, in the way they call it in the soul, and they line up in 3 different lines, right? So if you can think of it in terms of like make it 3 vertical lines, you have, of course, the 3 lines of the 3 points, the 3 koiches of the intellect, which is chachma, bina, and das. So chachma would be on the right side, bina is on the left side, and das is in the middle line. Over here, then, as you go down into the midos, you have chesed is on the right side, gvura is on the left side, and then tiferes is in the middle. So if you were to look at the left side, right, what we're talking about is the idea of how gvura is getting a certain amount of energy from bina. Now let's go back to bina for a second. Bina. Bina is the concept of his beinonus. His bonus means like this. We have an idea that pops up in our mind. That's the idea of chachma. The one point that comes up, like if you imagine like a cartoon character, a lightning, or a light bulb goes up over his head. That's chachma. But at that moment, when you have that light bulb pop up in your head, on the one hand you got it, but you don't got it at the same time. It's clear and it's not clear. How do I make it clear? The way to make it clear is to break it into pieces. The idea of Bina is break things down into details. Breaking it into details and figuring out each little point until I understand the piece of Chachma so well. Once those details come out, then I can bring it down into my emotions. So what we're saying here is that this Beinoni, who has been meditating, he's been thinking about, contemplating about Hashem in his davening, before his davening, in his davening, he's spending a lot of time thinking about all the details that he's learned in Chassidus, right, in Kabbalah, and he's really putting it all together. This should cause within him an emotional reaction of being very excited. Very, very excited about what? About Hashem. That's what he's excited about. To the point that it's burning up within him that he needs Hashem. I want Hashem. That's the way he feels. When you have that energy, there's nothing that's going to be able to stop you. That energy is overpowering everything else within him. That's the level that we're talking about here. When that's happening, so then obviously the Nefesh Bahamis doesn't have a chance. And that's what we're talking about. So that's what he means when he says that he'll give birth. What does it mean to give birth? It means that it was already in his intellect. It was already in his mind. But it has to come out in a revealed way. How does it come out in a revealed way? When it comes out into his emotions. That's the idea of giving birth in your emotions of something that was in your mind. So now that he has this whole idea in his mind, and he has a great understanding of Hashem, and he's thought about it, and he's contemplated, and he's broken it down into all the different details, now it gives birth to it, and he explodes in his heart. So then at that point, he has an ava aza la Hashem kirish be'esh, like a burning fire. Bechala yamini, in the right side of his heart, shebelibo, ve'az iskafya sitra acher shebechala smoli. So then he's just going to turn over, right, all the other side, all the negativity, all the evil that's in the left side, right, and that's the way it is, right. That's the way it's being expressed. Okay, so let's stop here for today, and Mitzvah Hashem will continue in tomorrow's class.